we're live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's SAP Community Call. It's our very first call with Jan Gilg, President and Chief Product Owner for SAP S4HANA Cloud. And today we're going to be looking at understanding how S4HANA Cloud can power businesses of the future. With that, without further ado, over to you, Jan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, and also welcome from my side. I have to say, actually, where I live here in Heidelberg in Germany, we had 37 degrees Celsius yesterday, which is almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Actually, one of the hottest days in June ever in the Heidelberg region. So you can see that we're now really feeling the global warming and its effects. If I look into the Paris Agreement, it talks about capping the global warming significantly below 2 degrees total. And I just read an article for Germany to even have a 50% chance to achieve that. Actually, to achieve 1.5 degrees warming only, we can only spend another 3.1 gigatons of emission, which means at the current rate, and assuming that this goes down now immediately in a linear way, Germany needs to be carbon neutral by 2031. And even our government says the current plans, they do say 2045. So we just see and realize this is not very realistic at the moment. And the question is, or we can actually only assume what this will now mean in terms of regulation and pressure that is about to come in the next couple of years towards the economy, but also towards us as regular consumers. So it is really real, I think, and sustainability, in my mind, has become actually the biggest challenge of our time. So we need to use any technology that can help actually to stay ahead of this curve and even give us a chance or a remote chance to tackle those problems. And if you think about it, ERP solutions, they have been the backbone for every company's operations forever now, since they're in the market, and managing natural resources like emissions, like waste, etc. This will have to be front and center of the value proposition of any next generation ERP solution. And so it is the case for SAP S4HANA Cloud. And but there's more. There's certainly more to this. Like answering questions what a modern ERP solution can actually do for businesses to help them manage their cash and stay liquid in times of 8 to 10% inflation and rising interest rates. And that's the situation in which we're in currently. Or how actually a networked ERP solution can help manage inventories and costs in midst of massive disrupted supply chains that we're obviously seeing. And each one of us probably can experience that in our daily lives. So today we would like to touch actually on some of those topics. And in order to do so, I have actually brought two colleagues with me who can share their insights as well. On the one hand side, I have Sven Denecken, who's the COO and Head of Product Success for SAP S4HANA. And I have Paul Saunders, the Head of Strategy for SAP S4HANA Cloud. And Paul, let's start with you. Happy to have you here with me.
Thank you, Jan. It's good to be here. Not quite as warm here in Scotland, but we have unseasonably warm weather. In fact, the only reason I've got a sweatshirt on is because I'm sitting inside a basement kind of building. But apart from that, it's lovely outside.
Yeah. So and actually, it has cooled down a little bit here as well by now. But let's talk a little bit about ERP, Paul. And I mentioned a couple of the things that I believe an ERP solution in the cloud or the next generation of ERP should be able to do. But what do you think? Why should companies now actually start in this current environment an ERP transformation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there are very few things quite as divisive in technology and business as the term ERP. I think when, and Sven and I have gone back and forth on this many times, but Sven, when we say, let's just say for now that Gartner came up with the term ERP back in the 1990s, it was about 6 months after that, I think, that the first article came out that said, do we still need ERP? And I think for the last, 30 plus years, there's been this question, ERP, do we still need it? And I see it that ERP is not just still relevant in 2022. It's probably more relevant today than it ever has been for all of the challenges, Jan, that you laid out before. How does a business, we've been talking in technology for so long about digital disruption, and the world changing and all this sort of stuff. We're now all living through it. We've never seen anything where we've had customers disrupted and supply chains disrupted. And now we've got, hyperinflation and stagflation and global conflict and all of this sort of stuff. What businesses need is, how do they address, as my customers change, how do I make sure I'm providing the right product, the right service? How do I get, the supply chains to have some sort of resiliency? And then how do I meet this need of a changing workforce? Because of course, we didn't add in there the whole great resignation and people working from home and working remotely and all of these kind of things. So I think the future of ERP is no different than the future of work. The two things are so completely tied together. Business in 2022 is not the same as business in 1992. And if you have an ERP solution that was set up in the last 20, 30 years, I would argue that your business isn't the same today. So you have to do things in a very, very different way. And so, that's my case study and my plea to say that ERP isn't old-fashioned. It just changes the same way that music changes over time. It's the same 8 notes and 12 semitones or whatever it might be, but you reconfigure it into a different style of music for a different audience. And that's the same thing with ERP today.
Yeah, I'm fully agreed, Paul. And I think, to add a little bit to the terminology, instead of talking only about ERP, there's a lot of talk in the market about cloud ERP now. And frankly, that kind of shows, or should actually represent, the next generation of an ERP solution. And I touched on a couple of things which I believe will be important for such a solution, or should be front and center. And I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail later. But from your perspective, what should people actually consider when they think about something like cloud ERP, meaning the next generation or the transformation that they have ahead of them now?
It's, again, another good question. I think the most important thing to think of with cloud ERP is what can you do differently using those cloud technologies than you can do today? I think if you think about the benefits of cloud, those have been around, those benefits have been quite clear for the last 20 years. This ability to have, massive scalability to, I think we've all now agreed that cloud is as secure, probably more secure than I can run things in my own data center. It's the ability to take innovation as SAP provides that innovation and to be able to get value from that so much faster. But the thing that is really important to think about is, what can we as a business, what can I as an individual at a company do differently by leveraging those cloud technologies? Just having cloud isn't really going to help me. And that's why I think that SAP with Rise has really taken things to that next level, to say, it's not just about the technology. SAP has been providing the best technology for 50 years. We've got the 50 years of absolute leadership in business applications and industries and so on. And the technology piece is the underpinning of all of this. But having somebody like SAP partner with you to transform how your business works and to be able to meet that changing world of work going forward is really critical. So with cloud, it's about thinking about, what are the things that we do as a business that are just things we have to do to stay in business, and how can we standardize on those, move those to S/4HANA Cloud and optimize on them and drive a lot of value out of them, but then focus on what differentiates us as a business with other parts of S/4HANA, but also other parts of the SAP portfolio in general. So I think it's you've got to start with that different mindset. First off, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what are we going to be able to do differently? Don't just say, this is about me moving to the cloud and that's all I need to think about.
Yeah, I agree. And we discussed about this quite a bit. I believe, as you said, the cloud's around for 25 years. And I think moving per se to the cloud is not the objective. No, CEO would say, I do want to move my business to the cloud. I think it's all about always customer outcome and what can be achieved with that. And you mentioned some of the more generic benefits of cloud, and I think that's good. And I think it's fairly well understood. I do believe also the model of software as a service has some clear, benefits when we think about the continuous innovation or consumption of innovation. Customers don't have to care about upgrades. They basically get it pushed by the vendor and are able then actually to consume this innovation at any point in time. So I think also that is fairly well understood. And then obviously the question is, but then why SAP and why SAP S/4HANA Cloud? So how do we then differentiate again in this marketplace place when we say cloud is basically a table stake, the software as a service model is well established. So why then SAP and SAP S/4HANA Cloud in your mind?
So I think when you ask people to think about SAP, there's often a view that SAP is very big, very complicated as an organization, but always very capable. I don't think throughout SAP's history anybody has ever said, "Oh, their stuff's not very good. It's not very reliable. It doesn't really work well." That's never been the challenge for SAP. And I think where we are now with S/4HANA Cloud is that we've taken this 50 years of experience, this 50 years of technology and industry and business apps capability and everything, and brought it to a solution that reaches a much broader market. It's not just the Fortune 100, Fortune 500, or even the Fortune 2000 companies. It's every company from kind of the startup and scale-ups all the way through to the biggest, most global organizations. Why SAP, I think, is the first question. Any company, when they're thinking about how am I going to grow my business? How am I going to optimize my business? How am I going to drive for a more sustainable business? All of the challenges that you talked about up front. I think there's only one company, being SAP, that can address the operationalizing of sustainability. Everybody can report on sustainability. That's not the challenge. But as your customers change, if I think about it, if I want to buy a new car, for example, right now I can go online, I can configure it, and it'll tell me how much it costs. But if I want to be able to say, okay, well, what would be the impact to the sustainability of that vehicle if I changed this feature, these tires, for example, for these tires from this manufacturer? With the SAP Business Networks, we can pull all of that data together. The enterprise, the E in ERP isn't just your own little enterprise, it's the broader ecosystem. So I would say for why SAP, it's because we've been doing it for a long time and we're really quite good at it. We've now brought all of these pieces together into a ridiculously good cloud solution that is available to a much broader organization. You don't have to be the biggest and largest to be able to deal with this. And when it comes to that differentiation of meeting your customers' needs 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now along this sustainability path, I don't think there's anybody else that can do anything remotely like we can do at SAP.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. And one more question I'd like to ask you is really, you talked about it earlier. We are around for 50 years. We had our anniversary this year. You said, we are doing the stuff pretty well, which I would agree with. But also things have changed, and you mentioned RISE earlier already. So why do you believe RISE is really a differentiator, and how has it changed also the way we are approaching things now?
Yeah, I think when SAP first launched RISE, I was at an outside company as an analyst, and I thought this is something that nobody else has got. In fact, Bob Evans just wrote about this in Cloud Wars, saying that there's nobody else that has it. With the relationship between technology companies, technology vendors, and customers is very, very different today than it was when SAP started 50 years ago. Hasso said, Hasso said a lot of really smart things, but Hasso said a couple of years ago at Sapphire, it used to be enough for us to say the best run businesses run SAP. We now have to prove it again and again. The relationship between SAP and our customers is different. The customers are not just looking to buy software from us, they're looking for us to help them grow their business, optimize their bottom line, grow increase their green line, their sustainability, and so on. It's a very, very different relationship. The world's not getting more simple. I think, to be honest, my personal thing is I think we're all sick of this digital disruption piece. We know it's true. We've seen it, we've experienced it, we're all living through it. We know that. But who do you turn to when all of this craziness goes on and will continue to go on, but the most trusted company that you can possibly find? We know our software is good. We know our capabilities are good. We've got an ecosystem that is absolutely unrivaled. It's a different SAP. And again, I'll quote Bob Evans because I thought he did a great job when he said, SAP in the last 2 to 3 years is a very different SAP from what most people think of. And I think it's the same with ERP. ERP in the last few years is very different from what most people think of as ERP. Yeah,
couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm here with the company now for 16 years, and I have to say the change in the last couple of years has been significant. And I think everybody can see actually that we are turning into a different company, which is part of our transformation as well. So thank you very much, Paul. I hope you will stay and join us also later then for the Q&A.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about some key aspects of S/4HANA Cloud. I mentioned that earlier, and I don't know if we have slides. I brought only 2 to not bore you too much. Maybe if we can share them. But I'll start already. As I mentioned before, I think the value proposition in the new world, quote unquote, is a little bit a different one. And we've talked about driving top line growth, enabling growth for customers, and also unlocking efficiencies on the bottom line. For a long time, actually. This has been pretty much the initial value proposition of any ERP solution. And it obviously has to be the value proposition also going forward. I think the emphasis will be even more so on the enable growth piece. And here, in my mind, this is all about AI-driven decision-making. It's about the ability of the system to do simulations, to forecast, to predict things in the future, and really help customers to grow. So ERP as a platform for future growth. I think the bottom line, for sure, unlock efficiencies, optimizing business processes, automating business processes, again, with the help of AI, standardization, putting in best practices. And at SAP, we obviously have a wealth of knowledge here, and we are shipping those best practices to our customers in order to really set them up in a very short period of time and get them up and running on a best practice of any industry process. So I think that is obviously still or remains a key value proposition of ERP. And then I mentioned sustainability already at the very beginning, because I believe this will be a major differentiator going forward. And frankly, I think it has to be a fundamental part of the value proposition of any ERP solution in the past is how do I manage sustainability as a company? And that is very holistic. We talk about zero emissions. So how do we reduce our carbon footprint, and how do we know actually what the carbon footprint is and how any decision that is taken impacts the carbon footprint? But also, how can I manage waste? How can I make sure, that I feed into circularity, and how can I reuse resources to the best extent? Also, again, here to help save the resources of the planet. And then finally, also looking into zero inequality. Yeah? So how can we create a workplace where everybody is being treated equally? How can we make sure everybody has the same opportunity in the workplace? How can we make sure people get the right learning opportunities, the right skill sets that are needed actually for the work in the past, in the future? And you said that, Paul, the relation between new work and new ERP is very closely related actually. And this really goes hand in hand in my mind. So if you move one step further, just to show you what SAP S/4HANA Cloud now is doing for the various line of businesses, because we believe this is, again, much more of a value than of a technology discussion. And we do have to address really all the various functions in an enterprise. And it's actually different than it used to be in the past, where maybe the IT or the CIO is the sole buying center. They make the decision actually which software to use for every employee in a company. And we know cloud and SaaS has democratized that much, much more. And I believe today, from an end user perspective, it is impossible to, or almost impossible to stuff down software, to an end user's throat if they don't want to use it. So very different value propositions have to be there, and there has to be something in it for everybody, whether that's the chief financial officer, which is always been a core persona, so to speak, when we talk about ERP. Obviously, in the new accounting that comes with S/4HANA Cloud, a lot of things have also happened, again, in order to help really close the books and drive operational efficiencies across finance processes. The chief sustainability officer, and you mentioned that too, Paul, at some point it was all about reporting and writing integrated reports and publishing that. Right now it is much, much more than that. It is really how can we manage carbon very, very actively given the targets that each of the governments is setting right now, and how can we adhere to that? So this becomes really more of a management board CEO discussion now, and it's a matter at the end of the day of staying in business. So a huge elevation of the whole topic of sustainability. But then also other functions like the chief revenue officer, we are seeing shifts in business models. Almost every customer is looking into services and subscription-based services now, whereas they maybe in the past had only sold products. And, we've known this model from industries like telcos or from utilities, but now it's everywhere. And especially throughout the pandemic, we have seen many, many companies starting to experiment actually with those new business models, and they weren't able to get their ERP systems to support those business models right away. They often had to start, with a different system or doing a lot of those things manual, and that would obviously stop them from really scaling. Here, we believe with S/4HANA Cloud also, we can provide a platform that allows you to adjust and adopt those business models really, really quickly. And therefore, I think a huge value proposition also for the chief revenue officer. And then supply chain. I mentioned that at the beginning. I think we see an unprecedented change right now, a disruption in supply chains, shortage of raw materials, of components. So it's all about optimizing the planning and actually seeing that supply chain is really shifting from demand-driven towards supply or constraint-driven. And how can companies really cope with that? And how can they, at the same point in time, keep their inventory levels and the cost of their inventories so it's actually still manageable for them. As I mentioned, we are operating in times of 8 to 10% inflation at the moment and rising interest rates. So this is really almost an algorithmic problem, and that's why we are using heavily artificial intelligence actually to support that. And we are tapping into the power of the business network, so connecting ERP processes and extending them into the business network to drive additional insights into multiple tiers of the supply chain, not only the direct partners that companies have and the ecosystem they're operating in, but really multiple tiers of the supply chain in order to anticipate disruption much earlier. And I think those are some of the key value propositions, some of the things that we are doing here. And you already realize it's a very different discussion about ERP and the role of ERP and the role of such a backbone and what such a solution can play actually for customers than we have seen this traditionally in the past. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is what do customers think about that? Because at the end, the voice of the customer is what counts. And therefore, I would like to invite Sven Denecken, I introduced him earlier already, to give us a couple of examples, because you talk a lot to our customers as well. And please share some examples here with the audience.
Happy to do so, and thanks, Jan. And by the way, for the records, Paul, of course, SAP invented ERP, but don't send me your Scottish weather in return. Let's agree that this community here, they invented ERP and Gartner is part of it. Now, just going back to that, and thanks for inviting me. So part of my day job is standing on the shoulders for a couple of hundred, actually product experts And that's the learnings which I want to share. And if we go to the first example, Jill, which is on the next slide, we picked an underpinning what Paul laid nicely out, what Jan said. This is a very, very good example of what we see in the industry happening. Out of the professional service industry, by the way, of course, a very big company supporting all vendors, many kinds of projects, but they rely their business on us, on S4. And they had a challenge. They had a challenge with 28 offices in 17 countries in whole Africa, which is a continent growing like crazy. And they said, no way we're gonna do the adoption like we did in the past, where ERP was invented. And they said, we need something much more standardized. And they digitally transformed more than 1,000 users on one IT platform, which is actually the S4HANA cloud solution. And it's not because this is a simple industry. This is an industry which is highly dependent on high standardization of getting professional resources to where it's needed, so skill sets. It's highly dependent on fast billing. It's highly dependent on interaction with their clients. And by the way, they're meanwhile servicing, of course, a lot of other customers who are going through that digital transformation in many parts of the world. The next example, which I brought, is out of the actually chemical industry or manufacturing in the mill products, which is on the next slide, the company Rehau. And it's a polymer producer. If you advance it one slide, Jill, they apply to what Jan said earlier, which is the automation, and more specific to AI, because they need to use a lot of the process robotic automation capabilities, and they got a tremendous outcome. Not only they were able to ramp up their subsidiary in China like in no time. A lot in that region is, let's do it simple and let's just do it, not all bells and whistles at the beginning. But they're also looking at that innovation opportunity that we have, and they really had astonishing numbers that we also were very pleased co-innovating with them to see that uploading of financial documents, everyone does that, everyone is annoyed around it, from days to minutes. Same of processing those orders. This is a region in China which is growing super, super fast, and we all know that. But processing 500 orders from days to minutes, that is TCO for the client at work. And that's why we also, as Jan laid it out earlier, are investing in those services, which we, like the kids in the candy store from S4, pulling out of the platform, of the business technology platform, but giving it the right context, giving it the right business processes, following the strategy that Paul laid out. I had one more, which I'm also super happy to share if you advance one slide, Jill. That is out of the automotive sector. It is a company called Smart Press Shop. Actually, it's a joint venture between a press producer and a car manufacturer, Porsche in that sense. But they're fully automated. And when I mean fully automated, I even mean that for their IT solutions. It's all based on software as a service. They have the highest standardization ever seen. They can track by that all production from raw materials to finished parts. There's no one from the OEMs like Porsche calling on the phone and said, I need 2 more. That goes all technically. The future is a network ERP. Here it is at work. But internally, they have all cloud solutions as software as a service, networked on an IT infrastructure all the way down horizontally, but also vertically integrated. Also their normal IT systems, which you're not going to expect in the manufacturing cloud. And even more to that, to add one notion is, they are now digitally transformed to a degree that their data they use, the semantic of the data, is not only networked and compatible to Porsche, it's the same to BMW, Volkswagen, and Daimler, which I think is showing networked ERPs at work already, where vendors before all were cooking their own food, and then they were coming to a dinner and said, mine is better than yours. I think meanwhile, they really order their pizza at one place. And that is actually, as an analogy, the as a service they get from SAP. So those are very 3 from different industries, different sizes and different maturity, good examples how the value proposition of cloud of standardization works. But there was one more actually that Jan, you shared at Sapphire, also on stage, a very long-standing and loyal customer from SAP. Why don't you want to take that over and share your lessons learned there?
Yes, definitely. I actually talked with Chris Cowles from Topcon. It's a company in the engineering and construction space. And I believe it's a great success story. They have been a very early customer of S/4HANA Cloud, and they have taken a two-tiered approach, which frankly we see a lot now also with large enterprises, that they really look for, let's call it satellites where they can start, whether that's an individual business or a dedicated process or whatever it is, to really start expanding the architecture in order to gain speed and in order to be able to standardize. And that's exactly what they have done. They have really standardized on the cloud edge. They implemented it, they learned, and they tweaked as it was in place. And with that, they have really consolidated all 7 of their systems that they had before, legacy system, into one S/4HANA Cloud ERP solution. And some of the benefits they saw, similar to what you mentioned earlier, Sven, they saw 25% plus reduction in time for a full regional consolidated month-end closing. So that goes really into operational efficiencies. But they also saw 42% of sales order automation now in one country, up from 18%, and that is rapidly increasing. So automation is obviously a big topic, and if you do that, then it also helps you then again grow your top line. So just 2 examples on how that can really materialize for customers here. And at the end of the day, why did they do it? From an innovation standpoint, they love the ability to consume innovation and implement also new ideas very, very rapidly. And at the end of the day, they were able to build a model that they could deploy between 3 and 6 months, which is really, when you think about implementation times in the ERP context, certainly not something that is top of mind, duration of 3 to 6 months. And also they get real-time feedback from the users of what is working actually and what is not working. And frankly, they also give us a lot of feedback, what is working and what's not working. I think that's also a benefit in the cloud, because the development organization has moved much, much closer to the customer, because they get so much more immediate feedback. And we have the ability to really understand how customers are using the cloud solution. And we can react much, much earlier than we used to be able to do that in the on-premise world. And finally, they have connected the solution into their existing environment and into many other ERP LOB solutions. And they have benefited from some of the integration work that we have done in the last couple of years between S/4HANA Cloud and some of our LOB solutions like SuccessFactors and in the CX world. And therefore, I believe this is something which is really starting to pay off in such an end-to-end SaaS environment from SAP. So with that, I would like to wrap it up before we go into Q&A, just to mention a few additional things to think about when considering an ERP transformation, as we had discussed also with you, Paul. First of all, for me, there's always a question, is there an appetite for change within the C-suite, actually, within the business organization? Because at the end of the day, ERP transformation and cloud transformation, that has to be business driven, and it has to be a transformational effort. And then think about what are some of the tangible outcomes at the end of the day that you can also measure then that is really improving your business performance. Because again, it's not a virtue or benefit to just move into the cloud. It's really what are the outcomes that are generated? What are the benefits that you can capture? And again, it is much, much easier to capture that. And obviously with our business process intelligence capabilities that came in through Signavio, we also offer possibilities to do that and support you here with that. And at the end of the day, it's also, you need to balance the business decisions and where your executive stakeholders are, where there's a value add and where there isn't. So it's all about trade-off discussions. What are the processes you want to standardize, where you say, hey, this is commodity, let's just go take the best practice, let's go as fast as we can. And where's maybe the differentiation? Where are some things that differentiate you as a company from your competitors? And here we also offer very powerful extensibility options on the business technology platform side by side or even in-app within S/4HANA Cloud. So also here an opportunity to differentiate for you if this is something really a process where you believe it will help us, actually, it will help you win in the marketplace. So that's for me 3 key things actually that should be considered when thinking about an ERP transformation, when thinking about moving to a cloud ERP solution. And with that, I would like to hand it back over to the moderator to open it up for Q&A.
And before we do open it up to Q&A, I'd like to thank both of, well, not both of you, all 3 of you, in fact, Jan and Paul and Sven, for your very valuable contributions so far. And we have already some questions in from the audience. I would direct this very first one straight to you, Jan, if I may. You haven't addressed the topic of private versus public cloud. Could you tell us more? Maybe this is one that Paul will also chime in on. So tell us a little more about why we have those 2 offerings.
Yeah, I think SAP is in a very unique situation in my mind. We are coming with the largest install base in the industry because we have been by far such a leading position in the market in ERP. So you know all those statistics that we like to show, and the top 1,000 customers and all the DAX companies and so on. They all run SAP and they all run ERP, and that's true. And as you can imagine, that has been an evolution over decades. We are around for 50 years right now. And especially those very large companies, they have created very, very complex environments, and they have put in a lot of customizations. And for them, this hurdle now over which they have to jump, and the transformational efforts they have is just a lot to take on. And that's why we were thinking about how can we actually help our customers to challenge that. And specifically those install-based customers, those very large companies, those more complex companies, what offer could we make them to ease the transformation that they have ahead of them? And the main vehicle has been RISE. Paul mentioned that, to really offer a transformational service for them, put our own skin in the game and say we will also take on some of the risks, some of the costs. We want to be your partner on this transition. And we're also offering a private option for S/4HANA Cloud that will give customers more possibility to bring over what they already had and give them certain cloud qualities for sure, like the ability to really run the stack then end to end with SAP as the key responsible party. But we allow them things that you wouldn't allow in a pure SaaS world, which is then the public cloud deployment. Like we would push upgrades on a regular basis, or we would basically not allow certain types of customizations and so on. And therefore, it is basically really a different product for the specific segment that we are addressing here, which I believe is very unique to SAP. And it shows in my mind, again, that we are taking a very customer-centric stance here, not basically only prescribing a target model like everybody else saying this is what you have to take and that's it. And now it's up to you how to get there, but really showing the needed empathy also, especially for those large customers and helping them on their path, acknowledging that this is not something they can do typically in one step.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. Before we move into the next question, just a quick call out to those of you watching live on YouTube today. Don't be shy. Please make sure that you post your questions. This is a great opportunity to get them answered live with our executives today. I do have one here for Sven, though. So with your knowledge of working with customers, and we know that goes back some time, what have you learned from them, or what have you picked up from them that they've realized they could have done differently? So it's kind of that question of at the end of the implementation, looking back, what would you have done differently? You've heard those stories from multiple customers. What stories are you hearing being repeated, or what stands out that you think you could share with our audience today?
Yeah, the top 3 that comes to mind, and thanks for that question, audience. So first of all, invest more in change management. The underestimation of the internal change opportunity. Some people only call it a burden, but opportunity to get rid of some of the historical debt, technical, process-wise, people-wise. This is an opportunity that most people in hindsight said, I should have done more. Second is, I wish I would have known more about the product when I started. So I would have invested more into knowing how standardization could pull off. And I trust that as Paul said it earlier, was never the question that we can pull it off, the question how. And that goes into, can I get more support from SAP, and the ecosystem will be number 3. And that is where I think RISE comes into play, which is also together with our ecosystem, picking the best partners, educating them as well, not as an afterthought. So those would be the top 3 that I constantly hear when you do a retrospective of projects. We do that very regularly, mostly also to feedback into the product engineering, what to do better. But especially in the cloud, there's much more moving parts, which we do for the client. You need to think about, technology. You need to think about the services, the platform, the ecosystem, the quality of the people you put in there.
Okay, so that ties in actually to something that Paul and Jan were saying early on. Really, it's not about ERP, is it? It really is very much more about that change management process and the opportunity that this gives. Okay, thank you so much, Sven. It wouldn't be fair if we didn't direct the next one straight to you, Paul. So here it comes. And this is a broad question. Take it whatever way you like. Okay. What makes ERP successful?
I love that question. I think realistically, to make ERP successful requires 5 things. And a couple of them Sven just touched on. But the first one is the executive buy-in. And by that, I don't just mean that executives say they're going to do it, and they're going to support it, and they're going to support that change in how people work, because Sven's absolutely right. It's about that internal change opportunity, but they're actually going to live it and breathe it and so on. So that's the first thing. The second part is governance. By having, governance is one of those things that's often thought of very negatively. It's about stopping stuff, but it isn't. Governance should be about enabling things to happen, about removing hurdles, about setting the kind of the guidelines of, this is how we operate, and having that effective governance is absolutely critical for success. The third thing is integration. One of the things that I think people often forget, and actually I would say that some of our competitor solutions, they will often say, look, you don't have to worry about integration and those kind of things. You always have to think about integration. And this is another piece, Jan, going back to your question about what differentiates SAP, I think it is that integration piece, the BTP piece, and how it's not just about everything doesn't have to be in an ERP solution in 2022. You build on top and you integrate and you tie the pieces in, and you want to make sure that it's as flexible and changeable as possible. And that the thinking about the integration, not for the sake of integration, but for what it enables, what outcome it enables you to deliver. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing, as Sven said, organizational change and leadership. And it's not change management. Everybody has got some sort of history in their career of being change managed, and it's not good. Having change leadership, why are we doing this? What does this enable us as an organization to be able to achieve? I think is really, really good. There's a video online on YouTube, and I'm sure it's still there, by Dr. Peter Fuda, F-U-D-A, who talks about moving from burning platform to burning ambition. And I think that's such a great thing. It's about driving that. Why are we doing this? What can we achieve when we've done this? And then the last thing that makes ERP successful, and it's so critically important, is data. Buying new ERP capabilities, buying new CRM capabilities, buying anything and not fixing data is not going to fix anything. Data doesn't just magically appear. If you didn't have historical data when you go live with your new ERP solution, you still won't have historical data. Data is really, really important. And what you find with companies that have been running lots of different ERP, and one of the challenges of kind of that ugly old best of breed world, is everybody would show up with their own Excel spreadsheets or their own source of the truth. And then you have questions like, so what do we mean by product? What do we mean by an employee? What do we mean by this? those questions have to be sorted out. So those are the things that make ERP successful. Oh, and then the last thing, working with SAP, of course. That's what you need to make ERP successful.
CJ, there is no question that's too broad for Paul.
I was about to say he is
not.
the new Mr. One More Thing, isn't he? Okay, so I have two more questions queued up for you. I think I'm going to ping this one to Sven. Possibly you can chime in as well, though, Jan. And I want to hear about the geographical uptake of our sustainability capabilities, because there was a sense when we first went big with sustainability that it was a very Europe-centric topic. And obviously, we've just had Sapphire. It's been a world tour. It's still a world tour, but we had the Orlando show on site, of course. What vibes were you picking up on in Orlando, and are you hearing from our customers around the world in terms of the sense of urgency behind sustainability?
Jan said it very nicely at the opening already, that it is here to stay, and it's much more than greenwashing or reporting. It is really how you embed that. And I think to start with that, we also as SAP running 75% or 77, depending on who calculates, of the worldwide GDP, we have an obligation to do it right. And that's exactly what we're doing. And the leadership also, Jan, from a development perspective, our CEO, was very clear that his discussions with CEOs are 90% around how to grasp that. What Orlando has shown very clearly, that also disruptions that are around us, how to run a sustainable business on the supply chain and on that impact, is a very important one. And that's why I think it is much more than ever a C-suite discussion to execution now. So not longer like, hey, how can I get around it? But what does the impact truly mean? And it is also a very global topic, because it is not only the part of greening things, it is a part of sustainable, even goes to the employee sustainability. We called it war for talent before. So there are much more aspects that we need. And I think, again, coming back to the earlier discussion about ERP, it is more relevant than ever. Paul said it nicely, and that is also part contributing to it. But Jan, as you have been the co-author of that strategy for a very long time, maybe some thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I fully agree that it is a global thing, and it's actually not only a European thing. And I mean, we know that the SEC has put a pretty big stake in the ground in the US, actually, for companies to report out now. And I think that will drive a lot of different behavior. And what we are also seeing, especially those large US companies, they operate all globally anyway. So they have actually started already on this journey way before any regulation came up, because like Sven said, it's inevitable. Everybody sees that. This is not something that is just something that's going to blow over and then we go back to normal business. So they have all, especially in the heavy asset heavy industries, oil and gas, actually really the ones that are contributing a lot to the global emissions. They have started initiatives already years ago, and they are in full swing actually, and that is really a global phenomenon. So that's why it's really come out of this corner where it's nice to have a sustainability report and save a little bit of carbon footprint towards a very strategic discussion in the boardroom, actually where to invest, how to invest, with what partners to work with, and so on. So that the narrative has changed, and with that it has overnight more or less become really a global phenomenon.
Okay, one last question. It's addressed to you, Jan, but I'm actually going to invite Sven and Paul to contribute a unique point of view to it as well, if they wish to do so. It's quite an open one. Why is it so critical to move to cloud now? So just in a nutshell, from the three of you.
Yeah, from my perspective, the cloud is really offering an unprecedented level of flexibility and agility, and that is exactly what's needed in today's business environment. And I'm with you, with Paul actually, and we have beaten the digital transformation topic almost to death. But it's clear, I mean, we see all that. I think there has never been a time with more ambiguity. We came out of the pandemic and we thought things are getting more normal again, and then the war in Ukraine started. started. And more things will happen in the future. So you really need a platform that is agile and flexible, and that is the cloud. And then the question is, what do you build on top of it? And that is really then the software as a service model, which again brings a lot of benefits that weren't possible before. And I believe it's really a combination of a high degree of standardization in a cloud environment, plus the ability to extend then the solution and differentiate also in the cloud. That will actually then make companies successful. I don't see how, frankly, an on-premise model only can get you there. And that's why I believe it is really the right point in time now to act, to see how to get into the cloud and how to adjust or adopt actually a new and modern ERP platform.
That was possibly the clearest call to action I have ever heard. Thank you, Jan. Paul and Sven, anything to add to that before we close?
I would say that it's the service part that Jan was talking about that is so critical today. You can't operate your business by yourself, and it's not just give me some software and I'll go off and running. It's how can SAP's ecosystem, massive ecosystem of partners, all of this input from thousands and thousands of customers and 50 years of experience, how can all of that come to bear and help me optimize my business? And Jan said it absolutely right. Just when you think things have got back to normal, there's something else. And then there's something else. And that, of course, that's the way the world works. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the reason. It's just, this is the new normal. There is no going back to the 1990s. Mm-hmm. It's today and going forward.
Okay, thank you. Sven, anything to add?
Perfectly said. So let me add just a thought then. I think if we look into a glass ball, which is usually Paul's job, and he does that perfectly right, I would argue the networked ERP is the future. And my definition of that is from the blocking of the Suez Canal over the pandemic, and of course now the crisis we have with wars all over the world, by the way, but just a prominent one currently showing us right here, right in our face, that we need to collaborate much more. And I think this is where a vendor like SAP, SAP community like this one, has an obligation to come together. And we see that already where certain companies are sharing much more data as they know they can't pull it off themselves, where a networked environment is not only the future by PowerPoint, it's the future by strategy, it's the reality. You can't pull it off anymore because you want to serve your clients as a service, by the way, as an outcome, and you can't do the job that you normally do the old way. That's a little bit why I think also methodologies like consuming it as a service, trusting the vendor and your partner together, having that real environment about a trustful relationship, that is where I see the future. And then I just want to be as most as possible of those parties invited to prove, because we can together with this community. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sven, Paul, Jan. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to the audience for all of your questions. It's been a pleasure to spend this time together with you, and we look forward to the next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
For having me.
Yeah, bye-bye. Okay.